Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Jayam Udiraye. Ashtaprayeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki Krishnaya Vasudevaya Devaki Nandanaya Cha Nandagopakumaraya Govindaya Namo Namaha Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjanachalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupaha Kada Mayam Dadati Supadantikam Vandeham Shri Guroho Shri Yuta Padakamadam Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sagana Raghunathanutam Tam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Saganadita Shri Sakhanutamscha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namaste Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Shabhanusute Devi Pranamami Hari Vancha kalpa tarubhasya kripa sindhubhyev cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishthaya Bhutale Shantaradhanata Swami Namini Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishthaya Vedanta Swami Namini Namaste Saraswati Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Sheshanavadi Paschat Kam Karoti Vachalam Bangam Langate Grim Yat Kripatamaham Vande Shri Gurum Dintaranam Paramananda Madhavam Shri Chaitanya Ishwaram. Hare Krishna. So I'd like to welcome all the devotees. Of course, as we are discussing, there's a wonderful Sadhu Sangha going on in the US, where truly great Paramhamsa Bhagavats are getting together and giving wonderful association. Unfortunately, it's difficult for most of us. I think Bhaskar Prabhu amongst us is there. But it's a wonderful thing where there is a gathering of pure saintly Vaishnavas, where we get to be absorbed in Hari Katha, Hari Kirtan, Prasad, Vaishnav Seva, such an environment. That actually is true blessing. And such places of gathering actually become a place of tirtha. In fact, even one great soul, tirtham kurvanti tirthani, santastena gadabrata. Buddha says this too. Those who are carrying the Supreme Lord in their heart, and they visit a place, they make that place a tirtha. What is tirtha? Tirtha is where the Lord is present in a very conspicuous way. Of course, the Lord is present everywhere, but in a very personal way where the Lord's energy, His devotion is manifested. Because the pure devotee carries the Lord in the heart. He's a walking tirtha, he's a walking temple. And the Lord is even more accessible in that form as a great soul, as a pure devotee, in the form of a pure devotee, even more than he is accessible as the deity form. That is the secret. So Bhagavan is best accessed through the devotee Bhagavat. Of course, when the devotee Bhagavat is not always available, the book Bhagavat is there. But there is no equivalent replacement for the association, guidance, affection, blessings of a pure devotee of the Lord. So when we get such opportunities, we should try to take it. So we seek, of course, all of their blessings. We are not there, but following the orders of those great souls, we are trying to do some Krishna Katha here. Yatha Shakti, Yatha Balam, according to our capacity, according to our purity, according to our strength. So at the end of the day, we can only do as far as our capacity allows. So we all have our individual capacities to serve. And when I say capacity, we are not just talking about skill and ability. We're also talking about purity. We are talking about realization. We're talking about genuine spiritual character. Of course, Krishna is so kind that no matter what level we are, he measures us based on our effort and motivation at our level and based on our context. Krishna is very, very, very fair in his assessment. So that's one good thing. We don't have to worry. Sometimes we complained about our boss, our superiors, our temple president, oh, they don't understand what I'm doing and how wonderful I am, and I'm not getting what is due to me. But the good thing is, for every living entity, Krishna knows perfectly well. In fact, the reality is we complain because we don't understand how perfect his assessment is. We wrongly assess ourselves. That's why we complain. And I'm saying this inward. I'm not directing this comment to you. So sometimes out of frustration we complain. And I also do. But even when the good thing is, at least even when I'm complaining out of frustration, actually internally I know the problem is mine only. Sometimes to vent out frustration, we do. Krishna is tolerant. Thanks to him. It's like a parent who knows that sometimes the child just wants to rant and cry. So Krishna is very affectionate. So anyways, so we will do whatever best we can in our circumstances, and hope and pray that the sadhus and the Supreme Lord will accept our small attempt to, in pursuit of the instructions of the pure souls and the Supreme Lord, that he will accept our small attempt to hear and chant his glories, and whatever shortcomings he will overlook, and he will bridge that gap so that we receive the uttama fruit, the perfect fruit of our endeavor, even though our endeavor is full of imperfections. It is very interesting to note that even the greatest of great souls always see, of course, my endeavors are indeed full of million faults. But the thing is, for those who are even perfect in their endeavors and their consciousness, because the Lord is so high and spiritual perfection is so unlimited, that even the greatest of the great souls see that the endeavor is actually so small as compared to the Lord is so truly unlimited and infinite. What can we do? How much can we do? We are so thoroughly dependent on Him, His mercy. So anyway, our obeisances to the Lord and to all the great souls, and seeking the blessings of all the great sadhus. So we are continuing our discussion on the fifth canto of the Srimad Bhagavad. We are at a very interesting juncture in our discussion. The fifth canto, as we discussed earlier, is basically divided into two parts. One part is the dynasty from Maharaj Priyavrat, and the second part is the detailed description of the structure of the universe, the universal geography. This is also very interesting section. So we are at the chapter 15 today, which actually is a very small chapter. The chapter is entitled Descendants of Maharaj King Priyavrat. It's kind of winding up that section of the descendants of Maharaj Priyavrat. And once we conclude chapter 15, we are done with section A of the fifth canto, the first half, and then we'll go into the section B, which is the universal structure. So before I go into chapter 15, because chapter 15 is a very simple chapter, it's only 16 verses. And there is, I wouldn't say no, but very little philosophy or very little tatha there. It is more a list of chronological names of various descendants and few descendants, 3 or 4 kings out of those. A little elaboration is there. Out of them, perhaps, other than Maharaj Sumati, then Gaya, Pratiha, and Viraja. These are described slightly in detail. Gaya, yes, Maharaj Gaya in a little bit more detail. But otherwise, most of this chapter is a list of names. But I want to take this opportunity to kind of quickly summarize, other than giving this list of names, quickly summarize the 15 chapters that we discussed. So we will discuss 14 chapters plus 1 chapter so that the whole descendants part becomes clear. Your permission. So even going before the descendants of Maharaj Priyavrat, so that we again come back to the bigger context of this discussion. See, one of the things which is discussed in the Bhagavad is Visarga. Sarga, Visarga. Sarga is primary creation, Visarga is secondary creation. Part of Visarga is how the universe was populated after the various planetary systems were created, how the universe was populated through the various Prajapatis and their descendants. And as a part of that discussion, various dynasties are described. The original created being within this world is first Swayambhu Brahmaji. Then Brahmaji's son, Swayambhuva Manu. Of course, Brahmaji creates various other living entities also, but Swayambhuva Manu is amongst the main in terms of populating the universe. That is why we are speaking about them. There are so many stages. There is Narad Muni, there are the Kumaras, Lord Shiva who appears from his forehead. So there are many. But we are talking about Swayambhu Manu because we are talking about descendants populating the universe. That is the focus of this conversation. So from Lord Hari, from his navel, Brahmaji creates Swayambhu Manu. Swayambhu Manu has a few prominent sons. 2 of them are discussed in great detail because they have significant dynasties. One of them is Maharaj Uttanapad, whose descendants have been discussed in great detail in the 4th canto, including Dhruva Maharaj. And Priyavrat is the brother of Uttanapad. So he's the uncle of Dhruva. He's Dhruva's uncle. So even though Priyavrat Maharaj was the elder son of Swayambhuva Manu, he was not mentioned in the 4th canto. His discussion comes in the 5th canto. Because Priyavrat Maharaj willingly chose to remain a brahmachari and not get entangled in material life. The recap of Priyavrat's story. Priyavrat's story was exceptional because he wanted to be a brahmachari, but Brahmaji, Swayambhuva Manu, Narad Muni, everybody came to convince him to become Grihastha. This is opposite. Normally, spiritual master is saying, become brahmachari, and the disciple says, no. I want to become Grihastha. Easy life, comfortable life. Here he wants to remain brahmachari, but he's... So that's a very exceptional character of Priyavrat Maharaj. He accepted that responsibility. He was not interested in being bothered by being a king. He is, like what we have been discussing, so clearly understanding the futility of material existence. Uttanapad got married. Tanpa's descendants are there. Priyavrat was not interested. So at a particular point, finding that there is nobody qualified to rule, Priyavrat was dragged out of his brahmachari ashram, forced to marry. And he understood that this is the desire of the Lord. See, ultimately for a devotee, what matters? It's not about his ego. I want to do this, I want to do that. This is the ultimate principle of spiritual advancement, is to please the Supreme Personality of God. And ultimately, when we serve the instructions of the superiors, especially the spiritual master, Yasya prasada bhagat prasado, Yasya prasada nagati. That is ultimately the cause of our good fortune, even though that statement may not be the highest standard of devotional execution from an external, neutral perspective. I'll give one more example. I'm sorry, I'm deviating, but these are very, very, very important principles. That's why it's worthy to mention. And these are things which we should learn from. One of the very early leading disciples of Srila Prabhupada, Jayananda Prabhu, is the one whose picture is placed on every Rath Yatra in ISKCON today. So I don't want to go into it. It's a very beautiful life. You can look for lectures by many devotees. Naranath Maharaj has also spoken extensively on his life, and you can find videos on YouTube. You get a chance to listen to it. But he was a mechanical engineer. Most of the brahmacharis in those days were hippies of the streets, but he was an exception. He was a mechanical engineer, but he did not want a corporate job because he could see through the futility of material existence, and he was just driving a taxi. Just what kind of thing. So he was a very sadhu-like person, and he did not like the corporate politics. He was just eventually became a devotee and all that, and he gave up driving a taxi on the streets, and he joined the temple. And he was a brahmachari full time. Exemplary devotee, always blissful, always happy, absorbed in service, never criticizing anyone, loving to chant the holy names. Mahaprabhu says, he who chants the holy name and doesn't criticize others will go back to God. Exemplary devotee. At one point, he realized that the temple is in so much difficulty financially that rather than staying in the temple and continuing to lead the life of a brahmachari just involved in temple services, he would spend the whole day outside, going back to driving taxi again. Why? So that all the money that he collected through the day, he would come back in the evening and give to the temple. So that is what was needed to be done at that time. So externally, one may say, oh, these brahmacharis are in the temple and they are doing garlands, they are doing offerings, and they are doing puja, and see, he's driving taxi all over. I mean, from a very external perspective. But he understood. In fact, actually, he was not even instructed to do. Priyavrat's case was different. But I'm just drawing a parallel in the sense of how sometimes some services are higher not because of they are higher from a standard perspective, but they are higher because the one who engages in them sees the need for rendering a particular kind of service as an emergency need in a particular situation and sacrifices his own needs and own desires for a higher cause. This is the principle we are wanting to emphasize. So he did that in Srila Prabhupada, very, very extraordinary. Prabhupada said he went back to Godhead. He left his body early as well, under very unfortunate circumstances. Krishna took him back to God. So Priyavrat was this very, very extraordinary king, and he led without any grudges. He ruled the Bhumandala. Mark you, he was not just the ruler of earth. He was the ruler of the entire Bhumandala. He was the one with his chariot, and we'll discuss this in great detail when we come to chapter 16. He was the one divided the Bhumandala disk with his chariot into 7 islands. The central island out of which is Jambudvipa. And Earth, and inside Jambudvipa is Bharatvarsha, inside Bharatvarsha is Bhukhanda, which is Earth. So that whole geography we'll discuss later, but Earth is a very, very small part in terms of size of the entire Bhumandala. Vast. So these ancient Puranic kings that we are talking about, they are not just ruling Earth, they ruled far beyond what is the Earth planet. This is very, very interesting. So Priyavrat Maharaj, he ruled the Earth in a wonderful way for a long time. He had 7 sons, whom he gave the 7 islands, the 7 Dvipas who were ruling, and the chief amongst them was the great king Agnidhara, who ruled Jambudvi. So after Priyavrat, the next prominent king, there are many sons, but we're talking about the particular line coming down, which is the key line. There are many descendants, but this is the key line. So Maharaj Agnidhara, he was a great pure soul. Even though he was the son of Priyavrat, who was a pure devotee, somehow he was attracted more towards fruitive activity and attracted towards going towards Pitraloka. And the reason is because he was conceived when Priyavrat Maharaj was influenced by lust. Very interesting. So he got attracted to a heavenly damsel, Purvachitti. They got married, and he was busy in ritualistic activity. He was a pure soul from a dharmic perspective, but what was not a pure devotee. He married Purvachitti, spent time with her. Even eventually, Purvachitti went back to the planet that she came from, and he became so lovesick that aspiring to again have her company, eventually after he died, attained the same planet as Purvachitti. But he was a pious soul. His son, who's discussing, this is already, various chapters are dedicated to this, which we have already discussed. His son, out of the 9 sons he had, Nabhi was the most prominent. So Agnidhara was ruling the earth, and he handed over Nabhi, earth means the Jambudvipa, and out of that, Nabhi was giving the kingdom. Nabhi was a very great soul, a very pure soul, and Nabhi was very to have a son as good as the Supreme Lord. That was his determination. So, with the blessings of great Brahmana Vaishnavas, Rishis and sages, from wonderful yajnas, and the Lord blessed him by agreeing to become his son. Who was his son? Maharaj Rishabhadev. So we discussed that also in great detail, how the Lord blessed Nabhi indirectly by pure devotion, by becoming his son, because out of pure affection, Vatsalya Prema for Maharaj Rishabha, Nabhi achieved perfection. Correct? I mean, if you have a son who's the Supreme Lord, actually you'll be so absorbed out of affection, you'll become a pure devotee anyways. You're all the time thinking, serving. How can you not become a pure devotee? You are positively affectionate. So in this way, of course, the Lord also showed to the world that the Lord is even willing, is so affectionate to his devotees that the Lord is even willing to become the son of his devotee. So Priyavrat, Agnidhara, Nabhi, and Rishabha. Rishabhadev was himself the Supreme Personality of God. We discussed so extensively about Rishabhadev. So extraordinary. Rishabhadev is the example of ideal brahmachari, ideal grahastha, ideal renunciation, ideal avadhuta. Top class. 100 upon 100 marks. Which is possible only for the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So we discussed in great detail how he gave teachings to his 100 sons and, so many wonderful things. And how later in his pastimes after he handed over his kingdom to his eldest son Bharat. And he told his other 99 sons, your duty is to follow Bharat. Your service to me is serving Bharat. We also discussed how Rishabdev, now all 100 sons were not Kshatriyas. In fact, some of them were Paramhamsas. Some of them became kings. Some of them became ritualistic Brahmanas. So there are various, which again emphasize the principle in the Vedas that person doesn't become a Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra based on birth alone. Chatur Varanyam Maya Sashtam Guna Karma Vibhagasha. So even to a Kshatriya father like Rishabdev, they were Brahmana. Some of these children became Brahmanas. So there is precedent, there is clear Vedic evidence that this is not a system based on birth, a system based on qualities and training. But in terms of descendants, Bharat Maharaj was the most very, very great soul, a very pure soul. So Bharat was the topmost devotee, and that's why Rishabdev instructed all his other sons to follow him. And he was very affectionate to his citizens, and the citizens loved him. In fact, he was so affectionate and such a good ruler. And he ruled not only justly and perfectly, he ruled, even though he was performing all kind of Vedic sacrifices, he was always situated in perfect spiritual consciousness, always dedicating all Vedic sacrifices, understanding that they are all ultimately meant for the Supreme Lord, even though those sacrifices immediately may be seen for the propitiation of a particular Devata. So he was very clear that all the Devatas are the limbs of the transcendental body. They represent the Vishwarupa form of the Lord. They are limbs of the body of the Lord. So he had this consciousness. And that's why it is said that if we worship the Devatas, understanding them to be representatives of the Lord and free from materialistic lust, then there is no problem with that. The problem is kamaiste rita jnana. We approach the demigods out of lust, saying that, hey, Krishna may not give me this. I go to this Devata, try this. And one may get it. Krishna may say no. We approach the Devata and one may get it. Of course, sanctioned by Krishna only. If Krishna knows very clearly that you want this only rather than Krishna, then he may sanction. But ultimately still we are dependent on Krishna anyway. Bharat Maharaj very perfectly worshipped the Supreme Lord by performing various yajnas, but he was also simultaneously in his own personal consciousness situated in pure devotion. Exemplary life. Extremely successful. Perhaps one of the most successful characters, like his own father, Rishabdev. But so great that this whole planet is known as Bharatakhanda and the Varsha is known as Bharatvarsha. So he was ruling this area. So Bharatvarsha is one of the 9 Varshas in Jambudvip. Because Jambudvip was also divided into various Varshas. And even though Bharat Maharaj was the emperor, some of his other brothers were taking care of some of the other Varshas. So all that also we will come in. It has been mentioned briefly earlier, but we'll come into the geography and how the dominion was organized a little later in the second part of the canto. Especially exemplary about Bharat Maharaj was at the right time he renounced his kingdom, said enough, pack up, I want to focus on the real goal of life. And he went to Pulha Ashram, dedicated himself very wonderfully to amazing austerities, absorption in meditation, etc., etc. But then we know the very interesting episode of how he got distracted by material compassion, became inattentive, got attached to a deer in material affection, and eventually got distracted from his sadhana and the real goal of life, eventually resulting in his fall down by becoming a deer. So in fact, we have been discussing about Bharat Maharaj and his three incarnations: Bharat, deer Bharat, and Jad Bharat. King Bharat, deer Bharat. So that's deer. He probably didn't have any name, but he remembered he was Bharat Maharaj even when he was in his deer body. And then eventually he becomes Jad Bharat, and we've been discussing the story about Jad Bharat in great detail, how he was so especially careful not get distracted from the spiritual path again. Because you have to understand our every successful life, even for us, even at our level, we are given lessons and chances to learn some things which we have been messing up for many previous lifetimes. We have to learn, otherwise we don't move ahead. Otherwise we go on giving the same exam again and again. Fail, resit for the exam. Fail, resit for the exam. So his lesson was be very careful not to get distracted from spiritual life. So as Jad Bharat, he was very, very careful. And one of the highlights of his incarnation as Jad Bharat was his instructions to Maharaj Rahugana, which we discussed extensively over the last few classes. And ultimately, Maharaj Bharat achieved perfection and back home, back to God. Very, very extraordinary person. Yeah. He's perhaps one of the most popular personalities. India is, officially known as Bharat. Bharat, of course, can be understood in various ways. One of the meanings of Bharat is Bha means light or effulgence, and Rat means engaged. Those who are engaged in the cultivation of light, light means spiritual transcendental wisdom. So the real essence of Bharat, even as a country, is a civilization which is focused on higher spiritual values. That's why this whole land of Bharat is actually so very important. That's why it's so important to revive that spiritual culture. Okay, so quick 1 minute recap. Brahma, Swayambhuva Manu, Uttanapad, Canto 4, Priyavrat, Canto 5. Priyavrat's descendant, Agnidra, we are talking about the main descendants. Agnidra, Nabhi, Rishabh, Bharat. Bharat had 3 lives, but the main, from a descendant perspective, the main personality is King Bharat. Because he did not have progeny as a deer, he did not have progeny as, Jad Bharat. So Maharaj Bharat had children. So now, the remaining descendants in one chapter, all these so many chapters, 14 chapters, all these 4-5 prominent kings have been discussed. Now, in one chapter, wrap up of all other descendants of Maharaj Priyavrat, downwards from Bharat Maharaj, King Bharat, not Jad Bharat, descendants from King Bharat. Okay, you are all with me, I hope. So you don't lose the broader flow, what we are discussing. So 35 minutes of recap, remaining 20 minutes of chapter 15. And by the way, just so that I do not forget, after chapter 15, chapter 16 onwards, the geography of the universe is actually a follow-up of a point which was mentioned at the beginning of the 5th canto. In the beginning of 5th canto, it was mentioned that Maharaj Priyavrat divided the Mandal into 7 dvipas, with Jambu Dvip as its center. So the second section is a question. You mentioned that long back in the earlier. Can you expand on that? point and what is that geography. So then Sukadeva Goswami and Parikshit Maharaj get into geography discussion, universal geography, which is the one of the 10 topics of the Bhagavatam, which is known as Sthanam. Okay, then the sixth canto comes into Poshanam, nourishment. So we'll discuss that separately when we come to sixth canto. But canto is a mixture of Sthanam and Visarga, prominent. So now we enter the 15th chapter, which is the glories of the descendants of King Priyavrat. So there are some 10-15 kings who are mentioned from as descendants of Bharat Maharaj. And as I mentioned earlier, 3 or 4 are mentioned as prominent amongst those. Now, not a lot of history is mentioned for most of them. So most of them are a list of names. And maybe other Puranas may be giving a bit more elaboration about some of these personalities. I do not know. Possibly. But the Bhagavatam doesn't mention. So we will mention the names, because if Bhagavatam is mentioning the names, then, if somebody's name is in the Bhagavad, then obviously they are worth mentioning about, even though there is nothing else. Correct? Any of our names happens to come in a future Bhagavad, in some other creation, in some other universe. Such a great thing. It is so much more valuable than coming in the Forbes top 100 list or the list of Nobel laureates, anything else. Even though nothing is mentioned, just one mention of the name. And the important thing that Prabhupada says that all these details are still spiritual because they are in connection with the Lord. So that is why should still take with reverence all these names, all these great things. That is how the Acharyas have explained to us. So the most prominent son of Bharat Maharaj, even though Bharat Maharaj had a few sons, most prominent son of Bharat Maharaj was a great king by the name of Sumati. It is a Sumati was also a great devotee. He followed the path of Rishabhdev, followed the philosophy and the path of Rishabhdev. And Bhagavatam also mentions something interesting about Maharaj Sumati, that sometimes some atheistic, Anarya and Pakhandi, atheistic and unscrupulous people misidentify King Sumati be the Buddha incarnation, which is mentioned in the Shastras. Now, I do not know why this confusion is up. I don't know. I don't have the context of the information, but this is mentioned, so I'm just mentioning this to you. In fact, elsewhere it is also mentioned, not in this chapter, but even the Buddha that we think to be the Buddha incarnation is not the real Buddha incarnation. Which means even Gautam Buddha, Gautama, Siddhartha is not the Buddha incarnation of Lord Vishnu. There was another Buddha appeared earlier to Gautam Buddha, whose philosophy Gautam Buddha adopted. Gautam Buddha became famous for his Buddhistic teachings, and then started the Buddhist tradition. But the original Buddha, the incarnation of the Lord, is a different personality who predates him. And we also know this because the Bhagavatam description of the mother of Buddha and the place of birth of Buddha is different from the birth and mother, the birthplace and the mother of Siddhartha Gautam Buddha. So this is a side point. I thought I just wanted to mention since that was referred to. So Sumati, he married Vriddhasena. He had a son known as Devatajit. Devatajit with his wife Asuri had a son called Devadyumna. Devadyumna with his wife Dhenumati had a son Parameshthi. This son Parmeshti with his wife Suvarchala had a son known as Pratiha. Now Pratiha is described in a little bit more detail. The special characteristic of this king Pratiha, again 4 or 5 generations down, was that he propagated very extensively the principles of self-realization. This means he was a preacher. He was a king. One of the main services he did was to preach about spiritual perfection. He not only purified himself, but he was a preacher. Janma sarthaka kari kar para upakar. Perfected his own life, and he also instructed others, and he was perfectly always remembering the Supreme Personality of God. This Pratiha married Suvarchala, and they had children Pratiharta, Prastota, and Udgata. So these 3 sons were very expert in Vedic rituals. And out of them, the first son Pratiharta, he married a lady by the name of Stuti and had 2 sons, Aja and Bhuma. Then the dynasties continued like this. Now this is a list of names. So I'm just going to read, like I mentioned, just for our purification, mention the names. Bhuma, the son whom we just mentioned, the son of Pratiharta. He had a son by the name of Udgita. Udgita had a descendant by the name of Rastava. Rastava had a descendant by the name of Vibhu, who had a descendant by the name of Prithusena, who had a descendant by the name of Nakta. Nakta, who married Dhruti, had a son named as Gaya. Now at this point, after mentioning this list of names, almost 10-15 kings from Maharaj Bharat have been mentioned, 10-15 generations. There's already 10-15 generations from Bharat now. At the point of the reference to Maharaj Gaya, Gaya was a very extraordinary personality. In fact, many verses are dedicated in this chapter to describe the glories of Maharaj Gaya. Maharaj Gaya is considered like a partial incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead because he had a very extraordinary character. It is said he was like the most exalted of the royal order. Very famous as a very pious king. He was a Raja Rishi and he is considered an expansion of Lord Vishnu. Appeared for protecting the universe. So it's practically an incarnation, partial incarnation of the Supreme. That's why sometimes it's referred to also as Mahapurusha. The Bhagavad refers to him as Mahapurusha, very great personality who is fully equipped with transcendental knowledge. Maharaj Gaya was also a very, very extraordinary king. He performed all the duties, the principal duties of a king in a perfect manner. And what are those duties that he performed very well? It is mentioned. Praja Palana are the primary duties. Taking care of the subjects, all needs, material, spiritual. Giving full protection and security to the citizens. Sometimes when we talk about protection and security, we immediately imagine security guards with machine guns standing at the door. This person got Z category security, this person got Y category security. We're not talking about protection and security just from that perspective. That is there, that is at a very external, superficial level. But true protection and security is protection and security at all levels of one's existence. Protection and security to practice one's religion and spirituality, protection at a physical level, protection and security at a level of able to get and maintain one's livelihood. There are so many levels of protection. So king is supposed to be on behalf of the Lord, making sure that all the needs are secure, physical and spiritual. Poshana, made sure that there was abundant food grains to feed everyone. Prinana, distribute various kinds of gifts to please his citizens. Upa Lalana, would conduct meetings, discuss with his citizens, make sure everybody was happy, and he would please them very nicely. He would also guide and counsel his citizens how to be first-class people. This is a part of the protection and security. Protection also happens by giving good instructions. Correct? Just like we protect our children by giving them good instructions on how to be safe, how to live in this world, how to conduct yourself, how to cross the road, how to protect yourself from unscrupulous elements. Several aspects of protection. So he did Anushasana, gave them good instructions, and Ijja. He performed a lot of Vedic sacrifices. He established and ensured that the system was there. And at the same time, he was a unalloyed, pure devotee of the Supreme Lord. And he was especially a bhakta, not just a yogi. He was a bhakta and fully transcendental in his consciousness. He was fully self-realized. He was not proud. Very, very humble. So Maharaj Gaya is considered so great that even great saintly personalities glorify him. In fact, the Puranas glorify Maharaj Gaya with a very beautiful verse. They mention that Maharaj Gaya was expert and he performed all kinds of Vedic rituals. He was respected by all. He was very learned. He protected dharma and he possessed all kinds of opulence. And he was a leader amongst those who are gentlemen. And he was the servant of the devotees. So that is a great ornament. You can be great in all ways. What is ultimately the greatest position? Hanuman knows what is the greatest position. Hanuman was never seeking. Sugriva wanted his kingdom back. Sugriva wanted Bali to be killed. Sugriva wanted his wife back. Hanuman was interested only in one position. What was it? To become a servant. And he was fully satisfied in that position. At the end of the whole Ramayana, Sugriva got his kingdom, Vibhishan got his kingdom. Everybody came back to their all respective positions. One is perfectly happy remaining where he was at from the beginning. What is that? Gopi Bhartur Padakamalayo Das Das Das. So that Abhiman, that I am the servant of Krishna, like how Advaita Acharya in Chaitanya Charitamrita. What is his Abhiman? Bhakta Abhiman. Chaitanya Radas Mui Chaitanya Radas Chaitanya Radas Mui Sir Anudas. I am servant. Who am I? Not great Brahman, this that I am servant of Chaitanya. So it's not that one is proud of himself that I am a great servant, not like that. Proud of getting the role of being able to render service. Not proud of oneself that I am great. So Sat Sevakaha, so he was a servant of the devotees. And Gaya was so great that he pleased everybody, that he received the blessings of everybody. It is said that he received the blessings of the earth, of Daksha's daughters. It is said everybody was satisfied with him. The Vedas were satisfied and gave him all kinds of benedictions, even though he had no material desires. The Kshatriyas, Brahmanas, Vaishyas, Shudras, all the Varnas were satisfied with him because he perfectly took care of them in all ways. Indra was satisfied. It said Gaya could perform so many wonderful sacrifices. And one of the things about his sacrifices was he was very expert in arranging somaras. And Indra is very fond of somaras. So if you can arrange somaras, then Indra will come. If they said Indra would partake so much of the somaras, Indra would become intoxicated. Indra was very happy with him. Where to go Saturday night? By the way, somaras is not a materially intoxicating liquor. You don't misunderstand. Somaras is It's a very pious, invigorating elixir. It has a different kind of intoxicating effect. Not the tamasic intoxicating effect which alcohol has. So please do not get bewildered by this. Somapa puta papaha, the Bhagavad Gita says. So drink the Somaras, they become free from sins. Those who drink other liquors, they become full of sin. So different quality. But nonetheless, Somaras has that quality which, sometimes something which is so invigorating and enlivening can also create a kind of mother. Sometimes when we feel too good, feeling too good about oneself also sometimes one becomes egoistic and proud. You understand what I'm saying? Sometimes you suddenly feel so top of the world in a good sense. Perfect health, this, that. All senses are so strong and powerful. Mind is working, memory is working wonderful. I'm feeling very, very capable, strong, powerful. That's a different kind of intoxication. So being too good in all material ways is also intoxicating. So Somaras intoxication is of a different level. I don't know, I have not tried. But I'm just sharing what I've heard. But at least one thing is for sure, that it is not a liquor. So Indra was very happy. And Lord Vishnu would be so pleased with Gaya that he would actually come and accept all these offerings. Because they were performed with such great devotion. And the Lord was always very pleased with Gaya because of his great pure devotion and his exemplary behavior. The Bhagavatam mentions, in this chapter it is mentioned, he who manages to please the Supreme Lord automatically pleases all the devatas, sages, in fact, all living entities. Automatically become pleased. Simply by pleasing the Supreme Lord. Why? Because the Supreme Lord is the root of the tree of material existence. This concept has also been discussed multiple times in multiple places in the Bhagavad, right from the first canto where we have discussed Yatha tarora moolam vishechanena taptanti tat skanda bhujopashakaha pranopahara chaitindriyanam tathaiva sarvarhanam achyutejya. Sarva arhanam achyutejya. When Achyuta is worshipped, sarva arhanam, everybody is worshipped. When Krishna is pleased, everybody is pleased because the root of the tree of all existence is nourished. Automatically, the trunk, the branches, the twigs, the leaves, flowers, fruits, everybody receives the word. So this is the shortcut formula, please all existence. So all the devatas up to Lord Brahma are automatically pleased, the Bhagavad says. Because the Lord is Vishwa Jivaha, he is the life of the entire universe. It is said the Lord was so pleased that he came to the arena of Maharaj Gaya who was performing sacrifices. And he said, I am fully pleased with you. It's so nice to hear. Imagine Supreme Lord coming and saying, hearing and saying, I am pleased with you. Such a nice thing. Then will we get this kind of a good purpose. For us, at least, if our spiritual master says something like this, Yasya Prasada Bhagavad is also very wonderful. Once in my lifetime, my spiritual master said this on his own. There was some situation, certain circumstances, and I acted in a particular way. And somehow Maharaj was very pleased. He said, I am very satisfied and pleased. So when the spiritual master is pleased, the Supreme Lord is pleased. When the Supreme Lord is pleased, the entire existence becomes favorably disposed towards us. So 4 minutes remaining and 4 verses remaining. Wrap it up. So after Gaya, Maharaj Gaya, he married Jayanti, interesting combination, and he had sons whose name was Chitraratha, Sugati, and Avarodhana. Out of these, Chitrarath was the next great king. He married Urna and had a son known as Samrat. Samrat married Utkala and had a son known as Marichi. Marichi married Bindumati and had a son named as Bindu. Married Saragha and had a son known as Madhu. Madhu with Sumana had a son called Veeravrata. Veeravrata and Bhoja had two sons, Manthu and Pramanthu, out of which Manthu, along with Satya, had a son by the name of Bhavana. Bhavana with Dushana had a son known as Twasta. Twasta with Virochana had a son named Viraja. So this king Viraja, who married a lady by the name of Visuchi, had 100 sons and one daughter. And the prominent son from those 100 sons was a personality known as Shatajita. So the descendants of Priyavrata are mentioned up to this point, to Shatajita. After that, of course, there would have been descendants, but the Bhagavad stops here. I do not know why specifically it stops as Satyajit. I do not know. But prominent mention-worthy kings were up to this point. The last verse of this chapter is a glorification of Maharaj Viraja. And I'm just going to read this because nothing much is described, but it's a verse in his glorification. We don't know his pastimes. It is said, because of his high qualities and wide fame, Viraja decorated the dynasty of King Priyavrata, just as Lord Vishnu decorates the demigods. So just like Lord Vishnu, Adityanam Vishnu, Bhagavad Gita Krishna says, right, out of all the Adityas, of all the sons of Aditi, who's the most prominent? Although Indra is the eldest, who's actually the most prominent? Vamana, which is Vishnu. So the Adityas, the Lord is there. So similarly, amongst the demigods, Lord Vishnu is the most prominent. And similarly, Viraja was considered one of the most prominent. He was like a jewel amongst the descendants of King Priyavrata. So in conclusion, the dynasty is like this. From Priyavrat, Agnidra, Nabhi, Rishab, Bharata, Sumati, Devatajita, Devadyumna, Parameshti, Pratiha, Pratiharta, Huma, Udgita, Prastava, Vibhu, Ritusena, Nakta, Gaya, Chitraratha, Samrat, Marichi, Bindu, Madhu, Vivavrata, Manthu, Bhavana, Viraja, and Shatajit. I didn't count, but I think almost around 20 generations have been mentioned. So all glories to Maharaj Priyavrat and his amazing descendants we see there. So it is 10 sharp, so we conclude this section, the first 15 chapters of the 5th canto, which is about the descendants of Maharaj Priyavrat. And as mentioned, the next chapter 16 onwards, the title of the next chapter is A Description of Jambudvip. So that's the geography section. So Maharaj Parikshit, this section, just I'm giving a prelude, starting the chapter. Maharaj Priyavrat begins this section, Maharaj Parikshit begins by asking Shukadev Goswami mentioned about this Priyavrat, and he divided the Bhumandal, and then Jambudvip was in the center, and Agnidhra and others were taking care of them. Tell me, about Jambudvip. So first he was more excited about Jambudvip, because Jambudvip is more relevant to us. Why? Because we are in Jambudvip. Earth is in Bharatvarsha, which is in Jambudvip. So if you remember, when we do various pujas, what we say? Bharat Khande, Bharatvarshe, Jambudvipe. Let's say Jambudvipe, if you remember, we do pujas. That I am situated in Jambudvip. Said Jambudvip, I am situated in Bharatvarsha. Said Bharatvarsha, I am situated in Bharatakhanda. Said Bharatakhanda, I am situated in whichever place, town. If you are in Malaysia, Malaysia Deshe, Kuala Lumpur Nagare. That is how we do the Sankalpa. And then we say in which time division we are doing, which so there's a particular way in which all these things are mentioned. So the Bhumandal is briefly explained and how the 7 divisions happened, and then the immediate focus is on Jambudvip because it's the area of interest. Correct? Like in school, we discuss the world geography, but India's geography we discuss in great detail. Right? Because we are in India, no? But we can know broadly. Immediately after discussing 7 continents, we focus on Asia inside and Earth. Sorry, India. Then we zoom into India. So something like that. So Jambudvip is explored in great detail first. Then the other Dvipas are discussed a bit more. So first, the horizontal geography of the world is discussed in the second part of the 5th canto. Then the vertical geography of the universe is discussed. Now you may be wondering what is horizontal and vertical for the universe. You have to wait to understand this. So horizontal is with respect to Bhumandal. Vertical is with respect to various celestial bodies, the planets and their orbitals, the various nakshatras and their orbitals, the Shishumar, a dolphin, and how everything is moving around and circumambulating Mount Sumeru. So that's the whole, vision of how this whole structure, this Bhumandal, including the lower planetary system, how everything is resting on the back of, not Hercules, not Atlas, the back of Lord Kurma, who is floating on the Garbhodar Ocean, which is emanating from the navel of Garbhodakshaya Vishnu. So all these things are described in great detail. So what we will do is we will take a pictorial tour of the universe. Now I was thinking how to exactly do this. I am still thinking that I don't want to go verse wise. I will try to take a chapter, and I'll try to take a few images which represent the chapter, and take those images and show those images, and I can explain those images verbally to give you some idea. So the detailed study of the detailed description and all that, I will not go into in the class because it will be too technical. And I also don't remember. There will be so many details that I will not be able to cover also. And it may get too boring also. Too much information and it may be a bit boring. So I will try to keep it interesting, explain enough so that we know. And the main work you have to do by reading the chapters. And this part of the 5th canto is hard work to read because it's very technical. So we will try to make it simple, and hopefully you will find it interesting. So I'm going to stop here. And before I conclude, I just want to mention, last time in the last class, I had mentioned about the CC class. that we intend to move it from Wednesday to Tuesday. So just want to let you know that this coming week we'll still do it on Wednesday. This coming week, and since almost everybody is okay, and those who are not okay, I have individually sorted things out that we will move it to Tuesday, but not coming week, but the week after, which means our next class will be on Wednesday. Saturday class will remain as it is, and the following week, the CC class will move to Tuesday following. So immediately Wednesday, then following week will be Tuesday. So please note, I'll post it on the group as well, and I'll send you reminders. Okay. Any questions, any comments?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Yes, Amit, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. So, Prabhuji, Maharaj Shantanu and Bhishma Pitama and the Kauravas and Pandavas, they also come in the same dynasty, right? Priyavrat's dynasty?
Yes, because they are Bharata's descendants.
Okay. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Yeah. So that part of the descendants is mentioned separately. Actually, Mahabharata gives a more detailed lineage. There are hundreds of kings, because this is since time immemorial. So yeah. So how exactly from here it comes down? Yeah, it will be covered elsewhere. But yes, they are considered descendants of Bharat. That's why he's known as Bharatarshabha. Arjun is referred to as Bharatarshabha, the best of the Bharatas.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Any other? Great, wonderful. So thank you very much. Auspicious time. We are concluding 1008. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Granthara Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Again, wishing Sarvalakshmi Mataji a very happy birthday, and praying to the Lord for blessings to her. She's a very nice, sincere, humble devotee.
Yes,
So all of you. So request all devotees to give their best wishes and blessings. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Hari Bol, Shri Prabhupada ki jai, Samaveta Gaura Bhakta. Hari Bol.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Thank you.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Hari Bol.